This is going to be a completely unique podcast today, something very special in terms of the subject. I am here with Stu Smith of Smith-Madrone. I am here with Lindsay Hoopes of Hoopes Vineyard, and Heather Griffin, and you are of Summit Lake. Thanks very much for being here today. Appreciate your time. We're here to talk about, how would I put it, the legal issues that are going on with wineries, with certain wineries here in Napa Valley, in terms of both county and federal issues. Fair enough to say?
Yep.
Okay, good. So I guess what I wanted to start off with, Lindsay, again, we talked with you last year about this subject, and things continue to change. This is being recorded on February 24th. So between now and when it airs, there will be, of course, things that probably will happen, and we'll try and update as much as possible. So I guess, can you give me a synopsis of where things are or why these lawsuits are happening?
Sure. I think the easiest way to understand the distinction between the state case and the federal case is that the state case involves a law and whether or not my family violated it. The federal lawsuit addresses the entire regulatory scheme and basically says even if there are laws in place, they should not exist because they are unconstitutional. So while it feels to everyone that the cases are related, they actually deal with different rights and issues to the extent that the federal case is dealing with whether the laws should exist at all, and the state case involves whether or not we violated a law that exists.
And what this comes down to is the whole idea of having guests here on the property to taste.
It is exclusively whether or not somebody can consume any amount of alcohol on the property. And as it stands this morning, only I am allowed to drink wine on the property.
So an ignorant question would be, even if I came here to hang out with you, would I be able to have wine socially?
No, and my father, Spencer Hoopes, because he is not a defendant, is not allowed to drink wine. So my employees can drink, but we don't have employees, and I can drink. My winemaker cannot drink because he is not an employee. He is a consulting winemaker. So we cannot functionally produce wine if our winemaker cannot consume, quote, any amount of alcohol on the property.
Which is, of course, logical. That's exactly what you'd want him to be able to do because that's the job.
Well, there's a weird abnormality, right? Because in Yountville, for example, so less than 1 mile away, all of the public parks are open container free. In other words, you can buy wine and go and drink wine in the park. So I can't have business meetings here where retail customers purchase wine for shops for consumption off premise. They can't try the wine. But we can take the wine and go to the public park in Yountville and have a business meeting. So I don't, I think, it's sort of your typical, a lot of people who don't really understand the wine industry making decisions about the wine industry. This is exactly why you shouldn't have a county council that has no wine experience making decisions and writing these types of rules. You shouldn't have a court who's completely uneducated about how you make, sell, produce wine making these decisions. That's the best I can do about, of course it doesn't make sense because it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. Well, and you are talking about the #1 wine producing area in the United States. This was a city rule in Yountville in terms of consuming in a park?
In Yountville, within the entire city of Yountville or town of Yountville, you can drink wine in the public parks. We are very liberal about alcohol permissions in Napa generally because it's an industry centered around, you said it, the production and sale of alcohol.
Where I come from, you can't do that, so it's kind of fascinating. How does this relate to the county in terms of laws and rules?
And when you say how does it relate to the county?
Does the county have any control over that issue with tasting in parks in the county?
Well, so there are a couple municipalities within Napa County. Napa County is the general overlay. So all three of the wineries at issue here, Smith-Madrone, Summit Lake, Hoopes Vineyard, all of our actual production facilities are in Napa County. The city of Napa, Yountville, town of Yountville, are different municipalities. So they are able to write their own rules about what businesses can be, what the requirements are for businesses. I don't believe at the moment that there are any winery production facilities in Yountville, because most production facilities, we are agricultural production facilities as wineries. So most production facilities are in the agricultural preserve or in the ag watershed, which is where Summit Lake and Smith-Madrone both are, or in, down in the industrial area of Napa County, like the airport and, down south in American Canyon.
Real quick for our listeners, just many people know we've talked to Stu Smith many times over the years. Stu is up on Spring Mountain, which is to the west of St. Helena. And Heather, we interviewed your dad and your brother some years ago, and you're on Howell Mountain, which is the opposite side of the valley. You're facing to the west, but you're on the east side of the mountain. And of course, Heather, you're here on the valley floor, just I guess due south of Yountville. Or are you actually in Yountville? Because I'm a little confused about that part now.
Yeah, we are right at the border of the town of Yountville. And so technically, the town of Yountville actually wanted to annex us. But Napa County does not want to give up any, quote, ag land, but they're not allowing us to function as ag land. So I sort of wish they'd let us go into Yountville.
Sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
But our neighbors are Yountville, and they love us.
Yeah.
Our governor is Napa County, and they had actually never even been to the property until after they filed the lawsuit.
Really?
We requested our district supervisor, Ann Cottrell, to come on at least 3 occasions, and she declined. County council, I guess, advised her she shouldn't come. We asked all of the members of the Board of Supervisors to come and view the property. They didn't come. I've asked the CEO, Ryan Alsop, twice to come to the property, and no one would come. And I figured they should probably come and see the property they're going to wipe off the map before they do that. I would think it would be prudent to come and actually have done that before they filed the lawsuit.
Why wouldn't they come?
You're going to have to answer that one for
Okay.
me. If I were governing a county and I were going to go after a tax-paying business that had been in operation for 40 years, I would personally make contact with the owner, and I would want to go see for myself before voting for litigation, because these are enormous consequences. Why would you put a tax-paying business out of business? We're just going to be on the welfare roll of the entire county, and we're a family of 7. So we have been working, paying taxes, contributing to the community for 4 decades. Even if we were wrong, I'm not sure why you'd want to put us out of business. That doesn't make sense.
I'd like to say I understand, but no, I don't. This reminds me of, I'm in the audio business, and lots of cables strung all over the place, and you're not really sure where one's going or where one's ending. So
there are strange bedfellows in Napa Valley that I haven't been able to figure out. I mean, I think unfortunately corporate entities do benefit from smaller wineries going out of business, and you also have the anti-winery faction. And so in an ironic sense, they're bedfellows, and they are the loudest and most influential. So you have, unfortunately, all of these small proprietors who fall in the crosshairs of, we think we're aligned with the wineries because the wineries are powerful, but we're not necessarily aligned in their minds with that perspective. And certainly, I don't understand why the anti-winery contingent would be against us, because frankly, all 3 of us, our wineries, have been in existence for 40 years plus.
Right,
so,
a lot of history here.
Well, it's not even just the history, it's that putting us out of business is not going to, quote, prevent future winery development. We're already here. We're in that calculus. So the real question is, what do we're sort of a known entity. I can appreciate why you might be against future development or future eradication of land, but why would you be against the functional operation of existing businesses that represent families that have been here So clearly have been paying taxes and contributing to the community.
I do want to point out also you are a farm here, and we have chickens and all kinds of stuff going on in the background.
Well, for the moment.
Yeah, for the moment. And maybe an occasional baby. We have a couple of twins that have joined us this morning.
Yeah, well, that was my favorite part about the whole thing is the county decided to shut us down while I had premature twins at home. And, you know, I don't know what the urgency was. They never bothered to come to the property before they filed the lawsuit. And they, in 40 years, have never issued a citation, a notice of abatement, a summary abatement. We've never been found in violation of anything. We've actually never even received a civilian complaint. So why all of a sudden there's an urgency to shut us down and completely eradicate my livelihood for 7 people while I was home on maternity leave with twins and on medical leave because of an urgent surgery blows my mind. To me, it's actually inhuman. I can't. And these are citations. I mean, just in case nobody really fully understands, it's not about we're a licensed winery on a property that is entitled to be a winery. So these are citations about corkscrews, cookbooks, which you're sitting here. I have a cookbook that we were featured in from a local chef who grew up in Yountville. We have a wine dogs cookbook or wine dogs book because our books, you know, our dogs are featured in it.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's not a bookstore. I don't even think we have, I mean, I don't know. I think we probably have 10 copies of books that...
Yeah, it's very simple in here. Yeah, you're not talking about, you know, a department store. Yeah. I do want to bring in both Heather and Stu to this just to sort of get people an idea of what your roles are in this. So I guess I'll ask you that just frankly, Heather, you know, your part in this, is this support? Is this, you know, I'm being attacked as well?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, my dad bought our property in the early 70s, and we functioned as we've been functioning as a winery, and have always hosted people on property. The county opened you know, we like to call it kind of the white flag process, where you could come in, get all of your entitlements straightened out. The way it was sold to me was that they were going to recognize your historic tasting levels. It was kind of a fast track to get your permits all squared away and updated. So we went into that process thinking, you know, the county was going to help us. And we've been stuck in limbo because they're now trying to force us to update our road, which is a multi-million-dollar project, which, you know, like a lot of small family wineries.
That's million with an M.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. You know, we don't have the finances behind us to do that. And they have, in short, told us that we're no longer allowed to see people on property, which, I mean, it voids out our business. You know, that's how we make our livelihood.
Right. This is not a hobby.
This is not a hobby.
And if I may.
Yeah, please, Stu. I was going to come to you
This is
next.
where the two suits kind of join together. And that is that on the federal side of things, we're suing because of things like the road that Heather is being required to put in. And we're arguing on the federal level that it is unconstitutional. The other one is that with Heather's permit and what they're trying to do, pardon me, the county said, and step in here and tell me where I'm wrong. The county said, come in and tell us how everything operates, then we'll tell you what you need to do. And that generally is a 5 or 6 year process. And in some ways, I think of it as a sting operation. They tell you, come in, tell us what you're doing, and we'll help you go through a speedy process to get you to the next level. Well, that's not what happens. I have neighbors, I mean, they're all throughout the county, where these people have been there for 5 and 6 years waiting for a permit. And they go, we're going to get it this year. The county said we're going to get it this year. But that was last year, and they haven't gotten it, and they're not going to get it. And the county is, for whatever reason, which I do not understand, I don't think any of us understand, the county is not our friend any longer. When I came here in '71, there were kind of a couple of legs of a seat or a stool that held up everything. One, we had a bunch of young people coming out of UC Davis or Fresno State as winemakers, grape growers. We had a board of supervisors, which generally was supportive of us. We had neighbors that were supportive of us. And that's all changed now. Now we look at our county and our county government. I mean, we're the goose that laid the golden egg for Napa County.
Sure.
Okay. It wasn't until 1988 that the Napa wine industry became the dominant industry for Napa County. Up until that time, it was cattle. And frankly, people were thrilled that the wine industry stepped forward and were starting to do things because it brought in money and it brought in opportunity. As I like to say, back when I moved here, women generally were either going to be real estate salespeople, they were going to be on the bottling line, or they were going to be a teacher. It was very limited, very pure agriculture. And that's all changed. And what we have now is a board of supervisors that does not support us, will not stand up for us, and for whatever reason, we cannot figure out. They seem to be the malevolent hand that is harming us. What they're doing with Lindsay is just unconscionable. They never sat down with Lindsay and said, okay, can we come to some agreement? They wouldn't even meet with her.
And I think there is sort of an important distinction. You have the issue of land use entitlements, and then you have alcohol licenses, which are regulated by the state ABC. And the county has been, in my personal opinion, very recklessly throwing the term around permits. I think we can all get behind the idea that we should all be properly licensed and properly entitled to do what we say we're going to do.
That's reasonable.
I think that's completely reasonable. I've been in regulation my entire life. I'm a huge supporter of following the rules. We have to remember that the history of Napa that Stu was just going through, before 1976, you didn't need a conditional use permit in the ag preserve where I am. And before 1973, you didn't need a conditional use permit where Stu is to set up a winery. You just could put one up, pitch a tent, and produce wine. Right. So the conditional use, quote, permit for all wineries in all areas in Napa Valley did not come into place until 1999. We are talking about a universe of wineries that pre-exist the use permit process. So to be clear, when the county says you need to, quote, come in for a use permit, that is a very misleading statement. These are all wineries that have been operating and have been entitled, meaning they have a physical land use entitlement for a winery that doesn't require a conditional use permit. And they throw it out to say, to make the appearance that we are scofflaws or that I'm a scofflaw. And I want to be very clear that that's very misleading. The net is that I think that the county has been incredibly misleading in sort of, quote, saying you need to come in and get a use permit. A conditional use permit is required for a number of uses. There is no one, quote, permit. It's not like a driver's license. So depending on what you'd like to do, you would need a different assessment on a conditional use permit. Wineries did not require any conditional use permits to operate before 1976 in all of the agricultural preserve, which is where I am located. And it was not required until 1973 in the agricultural watershed, which is where Summit Lake and Smith-Madrone are located. And all of those two areas are the most liberal agricultural regions. In fact, anyone buying property who comes into the AP or the AW is required to sign on their deed that they know they are going to be living in a right to farm area, and they are going to have to deal with the, quote, nuisances associated with farming. That is on every single title of every single property that is sold. And so in 1991, after they enacted the WDO, which reinstated a conditional use permit requirement for all future winery development, generally it's not retroactive. So anyone who was already existing as a winery did not need to go back and process a winery permit. It's basically like going back and asking the county, can I build my house again?
Yeah, right.
Of course you don't have to do that. That's probably the easiest way for people to understand. And so in 1990, they said, going forward, everyone is going to need a use permit. We have some wineries that entitled without a use permit. We have some that did an exemption, which was Heather and I both have the same entitlement. It's not a permit. It was called a use permit exemption. By its own language, that means you're exempt from the use permit. There's also a code specifically in Napa that the definition of agriculture today in Napa says small winery use permit exemptions, what we are, shall, which means shall, have marketing, sales, and accessory uses. That's pretty clear to me.
Yeah, makes sense.
And in 1991, after they had enacted the WDO, which is the Winery Definition Ordinance, which reinstated the conditional use permit regulatory system for future developments, they changed the definition of agriculture because, as Stu was indicating at the time, there was actually this interest in being more liberal about how we saw agriculture. We didn't want it to turn into Disneyland, but we appreciated that things like tours and tastings, promoting your winery, those were not Disneyland. Those were critical winery functions to enable the sale of alcohol. And those were critical winery functions with respect to just the processing of wine. And so those things were added to the definition of agriculture so that the government could not remove them. And there's also a requirement that all of our laws are consistent with the general plan. And so that term was put into the general plan so that we would forevermore be protected as winery owners in terms of tastings, marketing our wine, etc. They have completely bastardized the pillars, frankly, of the Winery Definition Ordinance and the definition of agriculture as it stands today. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go look at the code. It's all in writing, and it was their words.
Well, as I mentioned off mic, you are an attorney, so you do know what you're talking about, and all three of you, having so many years between you, know what you're talking about in terms of this industry because it's critical to your survival as well as supporting your families. We were talking about the agricultural preserve. You're mentioning that, and you've gone into a little bit. I don't know if you want to give us more of a brief but concise sort of a definition of what it means for listeners who don't know what it is. It was at one time the only agricultural preserve in the United States, as I recall. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Hawaii and Napa are really the only two that have particularly similar agricultural preserves, and Napa is very proud of theirs. I mean, I think the way to understand it is every community has zoning, generally speaking. In this area, you can do commercial activity. In this area, you can only have residences. In this area, you can, have a cattle farm. So zoning is a concept that everybody can get behind. Before zoning laws are put into place, in general, you can do anything. If you own a plot of land, you can do anything. So zoning interlays and starts saying, okay, these activities are okay here, this activity is okay there. We need an airport, but we don't want it in the middle of town. That all makes sense. So agriculture was the predominant industry in Napa, and the reason that we zoned this area and redefined agriculture is because we understood that agro-tourism was actually necessary to keep agriculture alive. So the ag preserve is a restrictive zoning class. It is a restricted zoning area, but it's restricted to preserve grape growing and wineries. And we realized that to do that, we had to make it economically viable by adding these other activities, which probably if you're walking down the street, most people wouldn't think of wine, quote, tasting as agriculture.
I mean, I like to think of it like the simplest term is being a farm and having a farm stand and being able to sell your produce out of your farm stand.
It's the exact
It's a
same.
simplistic way of putting it, but it's a very
that's okay.
accurate way of putting it.
It's all farming.
I think the wild card comes in with alcohol because alcohol is so heavily regulated in the United States.
But the
Just putting that
ABC,
in.
well, that's what's so weird about this is the ABC is more liberal than Napa County. We don't tell Costco what products they can have. We don't tell Costco, you can't open that box of pizza rolls and have people taste them, because they know that that's how they're going to sell it off of a big freezer shelf. Right. So why is Napa County interjecting to say, we don't want you to buy, or we don't want you to allow people to sample the wine? Meanwhile, they can't give me a license to sell the alcohol. The ABC creates the license to sell the alcohol. So we have a weird interlay here between land use entitlements, which the county regulates, the state regulates the license to sell and produce, and then the federal government regulates different areas of winery. So the state says, go forth and prosper. You're already licensed for a winery. People are already licensed to come there. You can serve them by the glass. You can serve them by the bottle. You can serve them tasting samples. And the state indicates that. The county has admitted we are allowed unlimited people here. So unlimited people can come here. They just can't try the wine. Sure. What is the government purpose to that?
That makes no sense.
Well, it's shooting yourself in the foot, really.
Let me throw in some. The ABC O2 license is a state document, state rule. And Lindsay, you just step in anywhere you want. And the county is a lesser entity than the state, just as the state is a lesser entity to the federal government. And the state has said to us just what Lindsay said about our O2 license. We have all of these entitlements that are there. The county doesn't want to recognize those, in my opinion, because it allows tours and tastings. It allows all kinds of things that are there that we do. But the county then says to me, when I went for my permit in 1973, October of 73, it said I could have tours and tastings, but never said how many tours and tastings I was up for, was allowed, because they ignored it. My permit said just this: describe why you want a use permit. And out of that describe why you want a use permit came tours and tastings, came number of employees. None of us who filled out these things back then had any idea that these would ever be written in stone. So today in the winery definition, in the winery database, I'm allowed 0 visitors per day, but 10 per week and 520 a year. Now, as I like to say, when I was young and in junior high school, we learned new math versus old math. But the one thing which does not change is 0 times something is still 0. We're going into a general plan update in the next several years, and the general plan is going to be using this winery database, which is wrong, because it is a massive misinformation. It is nothing that we can rely on. On the other hand, it's what the county can then use against us, because the county created it. And in the winery database that you have to go out of the website of the county to get to, it says updated February 2019. 2019? I mean, we're 5 years out of date. Yeah. And yet those are the things that when we look at what our entitlements are, we look at this and go, this is crazy. So then let's go one step further, which is, why do I get 0 visitors today? And one of my neighbors up valley, who gets the most amount of anyone in the valley, gets 2,625 per day. And when we look at where does the county make this decision, it's arbitrary, it's capricious. We can't go back and find why it is that one winery gets 20 people per day, another gets 200 a day, another gets 300. But what is clear is that when you put all of these wineries together with their entitlements, the largest wineries get the most amount of visitors, get the most amount of events, because we have to get a permit for event. So, and an event issue is one of the things we're also suing over in the federal court, which is that if we want to hold an event, have people come to the winery, maybe have a barbecue, maybe have food, maybe this other stuff, we have to ask the county permission. And the county wants us to tell them ahead of time what we're going to say to these people who are coming. And that's an infringement on freedom of speech.
There's so many layers to this that we're certainly not going to be able to capture today. My brain is ready to explode already, and we're not even into it that far.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe one way to help explain, the county has admitted that they don't have a protocol for interpreting historic records.
Okay.
And they didn't have a process for reviewing our applications for old historic wineries because there was no regulation as to tours and tastings or marketing events. In fact, the terms didn't even exist in Napa County at the time that the 3 wineries sitting before you were entitled. So they are basically using untrained staff to look at historic documents that didn't designate these activities because they weren't regulated and impose limitations on these activities that never existed in the first place. And the problem that we have here is that you have untrained people without protocol interpreting documents that don't even have any of this information on them. So when Stu's talking about the winery database is a document produced by Napa County. They go back into the old winery entitlements and they input the information into the database. They then use the database to enforce. If they see people coming to my property, they say, oh, the database says 0. And I say, where'd you get the 0? Where's the 0 from? So the danger is that nobody knows what they're buying and nobody knows what they're selling. Right. And every property owner in Napa Valley should be concerned about this. It's not just wineries, but as to wineries, these, quote, tours, tastings, they're not uses. They're derivative, they're accessory uses to selling wine, which we're all already allowed to do. You can't say that 0 is safe. You made me put in 3 ADA bathrooms when we remodeled the property in 2020. What were the bathrooms for? If it's not for members of the public, why would I have 3 ADA accessible bathrooms? You knew that people from the public were coming here, and why would they need to use a bathroom? Because they were drinking wine. I can't get my head around. And in 2019, when we get our O2 licenses that Stu was talking about, the county, the ABC sends a letter to the county to say, does this property have the appropriate entitlements? Do they have the entitlements? And the county sends it back to the state. And the state says, yay or nay. Right. They won't issue me a license unless the county gives it the rubber stamp. Mm-hmm. So in 2019, they wrote a document that says, yes, Hoopes Vineyard has a land use permit. You can go ahead and issue the winery license. That was in 2019.
This gets more complicated as we go, it seems. I want to wrap this up in maybe a quick synopsis again. I'll start with you, Heather. What are you looking for at this point? What do you want?
For us, we'd like some clarity, of course. I think my biggest bone to pick is the fact that our county supervisors and the people that work at the county have never put forth the effort to gather all the old wineries and say, look, there's all these inconsistencies. Let's, get a group of people together, figure out how to fix this. They've never, ever reached out to any of the wineries. It's also very sad to me that we have these big groups in the winery, the grape growers, Napa Valley grape growers, and Napa vintners.
Wine growers.
And they have really stepped back from the problem. They are fully aware of these issues, and they're not supporting the little guys that have unclear, issues going on. And I really think that they need to take a stand. They're telling us that they don't want to be political, yet they get reports from Napa County. That seems, whether you want to be political or not, saying nothing is still being political.
It's getting in the game.
Yeah, and for me, I grew up in this valley. I've worked my butt off in this valley. I'm part of the community. I don't want to have a board of supervisors or a county planning commission that I'm scared to go talk to. And it's not just wineries. It's the people that have construction companies here. It's the homeowners. You know, nobody wants to go in and talk to anybody at the county because they're scared of them. And that's absurd. We're paying these people with our tax money. Some of them are making $500,000 a year, and we're being screwed. And it's unfair. You know, they're holding us to all these standards where, you know, they have hillsides that are falling off because their erosion control failed for 2 years, and they're filling ponds with dirt. If it was a winery that did that, we would be tagged and bagged.
Sure.
It's just the inconsistencies and, you know, the fear tactics.
That seems to be the major word.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So Stu, where are you at this point? What are you looking for?
Well, let me pick up where Heather left off, and that is that all of us little wineries in the valley have no way to organize. If we were big enough and wanted to, we could join the vintners, the Napa Valley Vintners Association, but they're a marketing arm. They're not a land use. And every time in the past 45 years they've gotten into land use, they have mucked it up. So we're looking at the Farm Bureau, which doesn't help us. They do a great job for those of us who want to grow grapes. But there's no organization that will where we can coalesce and come together as small wineries, like the three of us are. The other one I want to point out here toward the end, and that is that about 2 years ago, 2 years ago, the Board of Forestry passed an ordinance called the Road and Street Standards. And that requires that if you do certain modifications at your winery, it triggers the county, Napa County, to make you put in a 20-foot wide paved road with 1-foot aprons on both sides, which is what Heather was looking at for a mile of road. So a mile, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. It's a huge amount of money that none of us have. We found a document not long after that period where the assistant planner wrote an email to his uppers and said, look, we got a problem. I've read the Road and Street Standards, and agriculture is exempt. We're exempt. What are we going to do about that? We can't let this stand. So they kicked it upstairs. And upstairs changed things temporarily in a way that said, okay, for this ordinance, we're going to recognize wineries as being commercial. This is an enormous expense to family-run operations. My neighbor, Barron's Winery, spent $750,000 to improve the road. Summit Lake, we're looking at $1.5 million to bring your road up to compliance. The county had the option of ignoring this because we're in agriculture and we should be exempt, or not, and they chose not. They chose to stick it to us. That is unbelievably negative for the wine industry, for small wineries, and it feels in my way that they're trying to put us out of business because we've been around long enough that Prop 13 kicks in. Prop 13, Little Smith-Madrone Winery pays about $15,000 a year in property taxes. If we were to sell, the new buyers would pay 5 times that, 8 times that.
They'd pay that every month.
Yeah. And so we keep looking for, why are they doing this to us? And I think they're trying to literally drive us out of business so that they can bring in the richy riches to buy our property so that they can have greater taxes, so that they can spend more money.
So for anybody to contact you, we'll start with you, Lindsay. In regard to this, Lindsay, what would be your email address of preference?
Well, believe it or not, we're small enough that no matter what you do at Hoopes Vineyard, it comes to me. But info@Hoopes Vineyard, orders at Hoopes Vineyard, I'd prefer those. Buy wine. That'll come to me. Or Lindsay, LINDSAY, at HOOPES Vineyard, singular.com.
Stu?
Let me give you my cell, 707-529-0402. I'm happy to talk about this. I've been talking about this for the last 54 years. The winery is Smith-Madrone.com. Send us anything, call us. We're happy to help you out, understand what we've been through. And thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Heather.
Same for us. We're at summitlakevineyards.com with an S on the end. You can call me as well on my cell, 707-481-0353, or my email is hgriffin, Griffin, @summitlakevineyards.com.
Well, obviously we can't get into 2 tons of detail with this whole thing because there's so much to it, but what we did do is get your time, which is the most valuable thing you pretty much have, all 3 of you, Stu, Lindsay, and Heather. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully our audience might have something to say about this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I think that that's the biggest part is it really matters. This is how we all live. It's how we make our living, and it's the future we're trying to build for our families. And so it is really important to us. It's mission critical.